Your car battery dies on a Tuesday morning, $180 to replace it. Same week, your dog needs an emergency vet visit, $270. You've got $0 saved, so both of those go straight onto a credit card. Not because you wanted to use credit, but because there was literally no other option sitting in your bank account. And here's the part that stings the most. It's not that you're bad with money. It's that you never had the one number that would have made both of these a minor inconvenience. Instead of a debt you're still paying off 6 months later. Here's something strange about your finances that almost nobody talks about. There's one specific dollar amount where the normal rules of percentage returns completely break down, where the math doesn't just look good, it stops making sense to even measure in percentages at all. My name is Davis. If you've got $0 saved right now and $500 feels like it wouldn't even matter, hit subscribe, because today I'm going to show you the actual math behind why that first $500 has what's technically called an infinite return, and why it's more important than almost any other dollar you'll ever save. Let's start with the real problem, because it's not what people assume. Most people think of their emergency fund as one long, boring savings goal, crawling from $0 towards some big number like $10,000 or 6 months of expenses. And because that number feels so far away, the whole thing feels pointless to even start. But here's what most people don't realize. The math on your very first $500 is completely different from the math on every dollar that comes after it. It's not part of the same curve. It's its own category entirely. Here's why. Return on investment is normally calculated as your return divided by your cost. If you invest $100 and earn $10 back, that's a 10% return, straightforward. But watch what happens with that first $500 emergency fund. Say you build it by cutting a few small expenses you weren't even attached to, a subscription here, some takeout there, money you'd have spent anyway, on things you don't really remember a month later. Your real cost, in terms of lifestyle sacrifice, is close to zero. Now, a few months later, your car battery dies. Instead of that $180 going onto a credit card at 24% interest, compounding into a bill that's still following you around half a year later, you just pay it. Done. No interest, no stress, no debt. So what's the return here? You avoided a specific calculable cost, that credit card spiral, using money whose real cost to you was nearly nothing. Divide a real, meaningful return by a cost that's close to zero, and mathematically, that ratio doesn't just get big. It becomes technically undefined, what mathematicians would call infinite. Not because it's magic, but because you're dividing by almost nothing. Let's do the actual math on the alternative, because this is where it gets real. If that $450 in emergencies, the car battery, and the vet visit goes onto a credit card at 24% interest, and you can only afford minimum payments for a while, that $450 can easily cost you $600 to $700 by the time it's fully paid off, stretched out over many months of slowly bleeding extra interest. Compare that to the version where a $500 buffer just absorbs both hits instantly. One version costs you real money and real stress for months. The other version costs you almost nothing and takes 4 minutes. That gap between a bill that follows you around for half a year and an inconvenience you barely remember is the actual return on your first $500. Here's why this matters more than people realize. Every dollar after that first $500 behaves completely differently. Your second $500 is useful. Sure, it adds more cushion, but it's not converting you from one emergency away from debt to one emergency away from being fine. That conversion already happened. The category already flipped. $501 through $3,000 are valuable, but they're normal, gradual, percentage-style improvements. $1 through $500 is the one tranche of money in your entire financial life that changes what kind of person you are in an emergency, not gradually, but instantly, the moment you cross that threshold. Let me give you two people, Priya and Sam. Both start with $0 saved. Priya decides her first goal before anything else, before investing, before extra debt payments, is a flat $500 emergency buffer, and she gets there in about 6 weeks by trimming a few things she barely notices. Sam skips that step entirely and tries to start investing $50 a month right away instead because that felt like the more serious financial move. 2 months in, both of them get hit with a $400 car repair. Priya pays it from her buffer in under a minute and rebuilds the $400 over the following month. Sam, with no buffer, puts it on a credit card and ends up pausing the investing contributions entirely for several months just to catch up on the resulting bill plus the interest that came with it. A year later, Priya has both a rebuilt buffer and several months of consistent investing under her belt. Sam has some investing progress technically, but it's tangled up with leftover credit card interest from that one repair, and the whole system feels shakier because there's still no buffer sitting underneath any of it. So how should you actually think about this? Here's the framework. Treat your first $500 as a completely separate goal from your long-term emergency fund. You're investing, all of it. Don't think of it as step one of a 6-month savings journey. Think of it as its own short, sprint-like target with a very specific job. Convert your worst-case scenario from debt spiral to inconvenience. Second, get there fast and don't overthink the source. Sell one thing you don't use. Cancel a subscription or two you forgot about. Pick up one extra shift or do a short-term push on eating out less for a few weeks. The speed matters more than the elegance here because every week without that buffer is another week where a small surprise can turn into a real financial setback. Third, once you hit $500, protect it. Don't touch it for anything except an actual emergency, and once you use part of it, prioritize rebuilding it before anything else. It's not investing money. It's not fun money. It's the number that determines whether your next surprise expense is a minor annoyance or a 6-month financial hangover. Here's the identity shift underneath all of this. Most savings advice treats your emergency fund like one smooth, gradual climb. But your very first $500 isn't gradual. It's a threshold, a line you cross once, and on the other side of that line, you're simply a different kind of person in a crisis. Not richer, not more disciplined necessarily, just no longer one flat tire away from a credit card you'll be paying off at 24% interest for the next year. So here's your action step. If you have less than $500 saved right now, that's your only financial priority this month, ahead of investing, ahead of extra debt payments, ahead of almost everything else. Figure out the fastest, most realistic way to get there, and treat it like a sprint, not a marathon. If this changed how you think about your first few $100s saved, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments. What's the smallest amount of savings that's ever saved you from going into debt?